If you asked me 5 years ago what Pokemon needed most, my answer would have probably been the same as everyone else's. Probably graphics, performance, better voice acting, bigger open worlds, probably a more ambitious story. But then Pokemon Pokopia comes along and suddenly I'm sitting here thinking maybe we were all asking the wrong question. I've become convinced that the biggest thing Pokemon was missing wasn't a feature. It wasn't a mechanical technology, it was a completely different perspective. For nearly 30 years, Pokemon has mostly been about becoming the very best. Battling, training, collecting badges, defeating villains, saving the world. And that's great because that's why the franchise became one of the biggest entertainment properties on Earth. But Pokopia asked a completely different question. What if Pokemon wasn't about becoming a champion? What if it was about simply living alongside Pokemon? And somehow that idea ended up becoming one of the smartest things Nintendo and the Pokemon Company have done in years. Because Pokopia didn't just become successful because it had Pokemon in the title, it became successful because it delivered something fans have wanted for decades, without even really fully realizing it. Let's start with the timing, because timing is everything in this industry. Pokopia launched during a very interesting period for Pokemon. The franchise was facing more scrutiny than ever before. Fans were becoming increasingly critical. They wanted more innovation, something fresh. They wanted Pokemon to surprise them again. That's not easy when you're talking about a franchise that's almost 30 years old. When you made countless games, movies, anime series, and spin-offs, finding something genuinely fresh becomes pretty damn difficult. But Pokopia somehow managed it, because instead of trying to reinvent Pokemon battles, it stepped away from them. Go back and look at Pokemon discussions from the last decade. You'll constantly see people saying things like, I wish I could just live in the Pokemon world, have like a Pokemon simulator, or build a home with Pokemon. I wish there was a Pokemon version of Animal Crossing. People have been saying this forever. The weird thing is that Nintendo never really committed to it. Sure, there were elements of it in various spin-offs, but nobody ever built an entire Pokemon experience around that fantasy. But Pokopia finally did. And the moment it was announced, people immediately understood the appeal, because who hasn't imagined living in the Pokemon world? I think we all have. Who hasn't imagined waking up every morning and seeing a Pikachu outside their house, or exploring a town where Pokemon and humans genuinely coexist? That's a fantasy millions and millions of fans have had since childhood. One of the smartest decisions Pokopia makes is slowing everything down. Modern gaming often feels obsessed with bigger, more content, objectives, systems, and more everything. Pokopia goes in the opposite direction. It tells players to relax, take your time, explore, build, create, and connect. That was exactly what Pokemon needed, because Pokemon has spent years trying to become bigger. Pokopia focuses on becoming more personal. The game isn't trying to overwhelm you, it's trying to immerse you. One thing that immediately stood out to me is how much more alive Pokopia is. Not because there are thousands of Pokemon running around, or the map's enormous, or everything feels interconnected. The Pokemon aren't just decorations, they feel like a residence, part of the ecosystem. They interact with the world, and they interact with each other. And most importantly, they interact with the player. You. That creates something special, because for once Pokemon stop feeling like collectibles and they start feeling like companions. I think Game Freak and Nintendo finally realized something important here, because most people don't love Pokemon because of competitive battling. Most people love Pokemon because of the creatures themselves. Think about your favourite Pokemon. Why do you love it? Probably not because of its base stats, its move pool, or its competitive viability. You love it because of its design, its personality, memories, and its connection to you. Pokopia understands that, and because of that, the game feels more emotionally connected to the heart of Pokemon than many recent mainline titles. Now, hardware-wise, because the Switch 2 deserves some credit here, Pokopia benefits massively from being built specifically for stronger hardware. The environments are richer, animations are smoother, and the world feels way more detailed. And most importantly, the Pokemon finally feel believable. For years, fans imagined what a truly modern Pokemon world might look like. Pokopia is probably the closest we've gotten, not because it's technically revolutionary, but because the hardware finally allows the vision to actually breathe for once. Pokopia didn't just appeal to Pokemon fans, it appealed to people who normally don't care about Pokemon. Animal Crossing players looked at it and got interested, the same as Stardew Valley fans or cozy gaming communities. Suddenly Pokemon wasn't just competing with other monster collectathon games, it was competing across entirely different audiences. That's incredibly important, because that's how you grow a franchise. And to be honest, Pokopia is social media gold. Every day people are posting screenshots, sharing their towns, showing off their Pokemon interactions, creating stories and making memories, and that's exactly the kind of content that spreads online. It's almost like free advertising. The game practically markets itself. People aren't just playing it, they're sharing it, and that's one of the biggest reasons it exploded so quickly. One of the biggest reasons for its success might be the nostalgia, not lazy nostalgia or cheap nostalgia. Pokopia reconnects people with why they fell in love with Pokemon in the first place. Before competitive battles, before meta discussions, online arguments, and before the power creep. Back when Pokemon felt magical, and when every creature felt special, and when the idea of living everything in that world seemed incredible, Pokopia taps directly into that feeling, and it does it brilliantly. For years, Pokemon has relied on a fairly consistent formula, but Pokopia proves something important. Pokopia is bigger than gyms, badges, Elite Fours, bigger than becoming champion. The franchise has so much potential beyond its traditional structure, and Pokopia is living proof of that, because Pokopia's success kind of sends a bit of a message. Fans are open to new ideas, they want experimentation, and fans want Pokemon to explore different genres. And if Nintendo pays attention, Pokopia could become the start of something much bigger, not a replacement for mainline Pokemon, but an entirely new pillar of the franchise. At the end of the day, I think Pokopia succeeded for one simple reason. It understood what Pokemon actually is. Not a battle system or a progression system, not a competitive ladder. Pokemon is a living, breathing world. A world people have wanted to live in for nearly 30 years, and Pokopia finally lets them do exactly that. That's why people connected with it, that's why it sold so well, and that's why social media exploded with screenshots and stories. Why even non-Pokemon fans became interested, because for the first time in a very long time, Pokemon stopped asking players to save the world and started asking them to simply enjoy living in it. That might be the smartest decision this franchise has made in years, because after nearly 3 decades of catching Pokemon, Pokopia finally answered the question we've all been asking since childhood. What would it actually be like to live there? And judging by the success of the game, the answer was definitely worth waiting for.